Bienvenida a toda la audiencia a nuestra
Welcome
primera emisión
to
de
our audience to our first edition of Science Talks. This is the first session for the permanent forum on binational waters, and we will be talking about women and science related to water and the border between the US and Mexico in this session. And before we begin the panel, we just want to remind you once again about the instructions for those of you who are logging on so that you can listen to the event in the language you choose, be that English or Spanish. In order to do this, look for the interpretation icon at the bottom of your panel. Choose the language you prefer and select mute original audio. We will ask everyone to please keep your microphones off. And if you have any comments or questions, please send them by chat. Our team will be collecting your questions and comments, and they will be addressed when we have time at the end of the presentations. So today I'm here with my co-moderator Elia Tapia Villaseñor, and we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Gabriela Rendon Herrera. I am a biologist from the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León. I was a research associate in ornithology laboratory in the School of Biological Sciences, and recently I have been dedicated to environmental conservation and work in the biology in the non-governmental sector. And I am on the executive committee of the permanent forum of Binational Waters, and my co-moderator Eliana is a research professor at the University of Sonora in Mexico. She received her PhD in dryland resource science from the University of Arizona. She has worked for the last 9 years for the United States-Mexico Transporter and Boundary Aquifer Assessment Program, and she has worked as a research associate and senior research specialist with the University of Arizona Water Resources Research Center, where she continues to collaborate on the assessment efforts. Welcome, Elia. So before introducing the panelists, I would like to begin with a riddle for our audience. And if no one in the audience can give the answer, then I'll have to go to the panelists to see who can answer this riddle. Let's see how awake everyone is on this Monday afternoon. Here's the riddle. Are you ready? A man and his son had a car accident. The father dies, and the son is taken to the hospital in serious condition. The surgery that the young man needed was so complicated that they called an eminent doctor of medicine to operate. And when they reached the operating room, the doctor said, "I can't operate. This is my son. How is this possible?" 2 minutes. You now have 2 minutes to answer this riddle. Please put your answers in the chat. 2 minutes and counting. Okay, I think it will only give you 1 minute. Okay, look. Very good. Yes. So our audience today is very smart. And everyone guessed it very quickly. Exactly. Yes. So, of course, the eminent doctor is the child's mother. And let me tell you that 80% of the people who see this riddle, the first thing they start to think is looking for some justification of why the son has two fathers. Maybe he was adopted by one and his biological father is the doctor. And so this is due to two reasons, really. First, it's because of women's participation in science, throughout history, even though it has been very important compared to male participation, has been very little, mainly due to obstacles related to culture and politics. And the second reason why we normally first think of a man is because when we're taught the history of science, well, the majority of the people we're taught about are also men. So it's natural to think first of a man when we're told about some eminent person in science. And I'm surprised by our audience, and it's a very pleasant surprise that the riddle was solved so quickly. And really, that is our aim with this panel, is to deal with some of the issues that come up when we look at this riddle and what are some of the questions behind that. And I would now like to give the floor to my co-moderator, Elia. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. And thank you, Gabby, very much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here with all of you this afternoon for this talk. Well, we'll talk about women and water science uh, on the border between the United States and Mexico, as Gabby explained. And I would like to first thank the Permanent Forum on Binational Waters for inviting me to be on this program. And the Science Talks program has the aim of promoting research by young professionals on the border. And our session today is particularly aimed at promoting the work of women scientists. Before we begin our session, alluding to the riddle that Gabi explained, after hearing the responses from our audience, I would like to confess that I myself, when I saw this riddle several years ago, I took several seconds to react and to realize that the eminent doctor was the boy's mother. At first, I thought the doctor could be the stepfather. I also thought that maybe some member of the family was part of the LGBTQ community, or that maybe it was an adopted boy and his biological father would be the one to operate it on him. So don't get me wrong, but my analysis took me from uh, 5 to 10 seconds to realize it before I understood. Wait, it's the mom. And the shocking thing here is that here I am, a woman, a scientist uh, who has studied these issues and agrees with principles of gender equity, and automatically I doubted our ability as doctors uh, and sent us to the fourth place on the list. And so I actually boycotted myself and the rest of the women scientists around the world, and that's extremely alarming. And that's why I want to call on all viewers, but particularly women scientists, to not put us on the bottom of the list. The changes begin with our perception and how far we can go. I know the path of women in fields that sometimes are considered to be male dominated are not easy, but we at least have our path to follow marked out. Someone else has marked this path. Our teachers uh, have marked it out, and our teachers walked this path before we did. And and our steps will become the basis for future generations. So we have to take those steps. It doesn't matter whether we walk them in boots or in heels. The point is to leave our mark. And with this session, that's the message I would like to give to begin this session. On our agenda today, we're talking about women, water, and science on the border between the US and Mexico. We will have a question and answer session, and we will do a closing to summarize the main conclusions. Today, we have Jesus Eliana Rodriguez Burgueño with us. We have Sochi Hasin, also, Laura Garza Diaz, and yours truly, Elia Tapia. Jesus Eliana Rodriguez Burgueño is a researcher at the Institute of Engineering in the Earth and Environmental Sciences area, and she's member of the Binational Science Group minute 323. She is a research and postgraduate coordinator, head of the Water Resources Laboratory and GIS, and is member of the National Research Systems of Mexico and the Institutional Water Resources Experts Network in Baja California. She's worked on different projects and, as a technical manager and associate, and has worked for civil society organizations, governments, and the private sector. We also have with us Sophie Placin. She is a postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Geography and Environmental Sustainability at the University of Oklahoma. She received a PhD in agricultural science from the French Institute of Agricultural, Forestry, and Veterinary Science, and she's been working in the US since 2017 on an interdisciplinary project in the Rio Bravo Basin, funded by the Center for Climate Adaptation Sciences, Southern Center of USGS. Her research interests include socio-environmental modeling, farmer decision-making and adaptation, management of water resources in the face of climate change also. We also have Laura Garza Diaz with us. Laura is holds an MS in applied ecology from the University of Kiel in Germany. She's currently working on a PhD in hydrological sciences at the University of California, Davis. Her research focuses on the estimation and use of natural flows to study resilience and ecological processes to develop ecological flows. She's experienced in the problems of water allocation on the Rio Grande Rio Bravo area. She has designed hydrological and hydroeconomic models for the Pajaro Valley in the region of the River Basin in California, as well as in Cuatro Ciénegas, Mexicali, and Monterrey in Mexico. Her motivation is to search for sustainable solutions and adaptation strategies for water scarce basins. And finally, we also have our colleague Elia with us, who I have already introduced. And I would like to now move on with our program and remind all of our panelists that they have 2 minutes for their answers. And the first question is, what is the need your research tries to respond to in the binational context? We'll give the floor first to Eliana. As you see the slide on the left side, we have a lot of resources about underground water related to Mexicali. As you can see, also the area that is shaded yellow. And we also have the Colorado River that you can see here in the right side of this slide. And all of this green here is the Colorado River. And this shows the basin. We have many issues related to the water in the basin, and we have flooding issues as well. So many times the water that reaches Mexico is for different communities in Sonora and Baja California, and these groups have had a lot of activity related to caring for the aquifer and conserving water in the river basin areas, as well as the transformations that have occurred related to agricultural activity in the area.
And this semi-desert zone, there's very scarce rivers, there's very little availability of water. The picture is not very positive. And this, of course, impacts the development of the region. And we need to know the quantity and quality of the resources. So where we work, we're measuring the resources and we do evaluations to evaluate the interaction. And we also do monitoring in order to understand the processes that the surface and underground water are going. So we cannot separate the water from everything else. This is a natural asset, and in the United States and in Mexico is a resource that we share. Everything is interconnected with the habitat. We belong to international forums, and the use and management of water in the boundary region is something that calls for measuring, because we're sharing these resources. So we have to do this together, and for that we need to communicate on both sides of the border. Thank you very much. So the time is up, so thank you. Sophie has the floor. And you have 2 minutes. So if you want to change the slide, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm sorry if I cannot speak in Spanish. I would like also to thank my collaborator, Dr. Palladino, Dr. Friedman, and Cox, who have helped me a lot to develop this research. So as it has been introduced, I've been working on the Rio Grande Rio Bravo Basin since 2017. And for people who don't know about this basin, this is a very water scarce basin because half of the area is located in the Chihuahua Desert, so with very low precipitation. Also, there is scarce resources. The water are used intensively for agriculture that represent about 5% of the land area, but withdraw about 83% of the water. And also for the population, estimated to be 10.5 million people, and that is mostly located in the Mexican side of the basin. So because of water over-allocation and degradation of water quality and habitat, the river has been classified as one of the world top 10 rivers at risk. And there are a lot of challenges associated with this, especially because population is growing and climate change may affect the stream flow of the river, both spatially and across time. Leading to more severe droughts, reduced snowpack, especially because the upper stream flow of the river are mainly derived from snow melt, and also to increase evapotranspiration due to increase of temperature. Can you go to the next slide? So addressing those very complex challenges for the Rio Grande require 3 key components. First, a system thinking approach to both consider the basin as a whole, so geographically, both the US and the Mexican side, but also as a coupled human natural system where human decision affect the environment, and the environment, the change in the environment will affect the decision of people. It also requires a better understanding of human decision-making, both land use, which affects the stream flow, but also the water management decision. And third, it requires to combine multiple kind of knowledges, both social and environmental. And so we developed a model for the whole Rio Grande Basin in order to understand first how land use and water management decision-making vary across different regions of the basin, and also how these strategies may affect and be affected by the whole basin dynamic under changing conditions, and especially climate change. And I will answer in the next slides. Thank you.
Okay, time's up. Okay, so that's your answer to the first question. Thank you. Now, Laura, please. First question. Thank you very much for inviting me. My research is trying to determine the power of the natural flow of the rivers in the basins. However, what is the natural flow? Go ahead. You were in the wrong channel. Okay. So my research is trying to determine the power of the natural flow in the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo basin to try to achieve sustainability. Now, what is this natural flow regime? Well, let's imagine that we are in a hydrological situation there where you see the green dot, and we deregulate the river and we take the pulse of the river. What we get is an hydrogram or a cardiogram of how the river works during the entire year. And you can see that on the blue part of the hydrogram, where you can see different variables of this natural flow that is important for the ecosystem. For example, in the summer, there's low flow. When the rain comes, there are higher values, and then we get to peak floods. As I said, ecosystems and the species that live along the river depend on this variability according to the time of the year of the river. So this river is very regulated, but we have a static, stable river where this variation is no longer taking place, and this means that the ecosystem is suffering. So knowing this flow regime is important because it will help us to know the identity of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo basin and to know the ecosystem response to these flows and also the interannual variability. And it's also an indicator of river basin resilience. Elia, your turn. To answer the question, what needs does your research work address? I would like to quote you from a report regarding the joint cooperation between the United States and Mexico for the evaluation problem. As I said, or as was said in my biography, 9 years ago, I began working in this cooperation, first on the part of the United States of Mexico in Sonora, and then on the part of the United States to the research center of the Arizona University. The information, the experience and the interpretations I'm going to submit to you today are part and parcel of my work for the Water Resource Research Center under Sharon Bibnet. That's the coordinator of the program. And I have to say that this work is not being carried out by one person. We have an entire binational team, and among the members of the team are people who are here in this meeting and watching this presentation. I'm happy because I'm going to be talking about your results. As Saul said, we are trying to understand and preserve transboundary aquifers. This is one of the needs, and we want to harmonize and the information that exists with regards to this transboundary aquifers, and also because we need to know the impact of climate change in decisions to manage underground water in Sonora and Arizona, the transboundary region. And here is the map showing you the aquifers that interest us in the aquifer assessment program. And in the border between Arizona and Sonora, aquifers are being studied. To the Water Commission in Mexico, to the University of Arizona, as I said before, the Hydrological Resources Research Center, and the Sonora University. And later on, I will give you more details about the results. But yes, we're doing an evaluation of the transboundary aquifers. Well, we're very sorry for these interruptions. And what happened, says the speaker, oh, yeah, we had an intruder, but we kicked him out. So now question number 2, how is your research responding to those needs? So what does your research offer to try and respond to these problems and needs? Eliana.
Very good. Well, first of all, we are a team of researchers, so it's not simply my research, it's a group of academics and postgraduate researchers, and we are working on the research of these binational waters issue, trying to use standardized analysis of sampling in order to have some common denominators of our hydrology studies. Also, we're working with the National Commission on Water and with civil society organizations and some private institutions to deal with some of the problems that our region faces related to monitoring and other questions in terms of training. And we have different multidisciplinary programs that we are working on. Next slide, please. The monitoring that we do and the data that the results that we get are related to seasonal changes. This data is translated to different other types of language and in mathematical results as well in order to give us information about surface discharges and other information related to the binational waters in order to study water resources and incorporate this information in academic studies and include other perspectives on the problems, such as social issues and the transboundary relationships as well. Next. Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Sophie, you have the floor. It's your turn. Thank you.
So for my first research question, which is how land use and water management decision-making vary across different regions of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo Basin, there were 2 components. The first one on the left, so I've been collaborating with 2 anthropologists to build a database of management strategies across the basin in order to document what type of adaptation the different actors, which are farmers, urban planners, dam managers, are implementing to adapt to drought, but also implement strategy to better conserve water. And so this database inform what type of practices, where it has been implemented, because there are a lot of differences across the region of the Rio Grande, Bravo, and what are the outcomes. A second component of the research was, and it's on the right, was to try also to specialize where those different actions are implemented. And one of the adaptations that emerged as key in the basin was the implementation of lease following program. So paying farmers so that they can follow their land and not irrigate, and therefore reduce the quantity of water being applied in the field. And so using data only for the US, and I will come back to this point later, we have created maps that locate where in the basin farmers have been following. And what we found is, in general, between 2008 and 2018, we didn't find an increase of following, but we found area in the basin where there are more fallow. And this is this hotspot in blue you can see here. Can you go to the next slides, please? Maybe 2 minutes already, but can you go to the next slide? Okay. And so this information about the human decision-making serves us to answer to the second question, which is how this strategy may affect and be affected by the world basin dynamic under changing conditions. So we implement a model with 3 components: an hydrologic component, a landscape component, and a decision component. And we run scenario of climate change and new strategy to look at future conditions in the basin in terms of stream flow, evapotranspiration, and change in land use and land cover. And in the bottom, here is an example where we run the model with implementing a following program for an arid ecoregion, and to see how land use may change from 2010 to 2060. Thank you.
Time's up.
Thank you, Sophie. And next, Laura. As we understand the identity of the basin, what we're working on is a database of daily natural flows over 110 years. And we're also working on a hydrological river classification of the different types of rivers for non-measured as well as measured rivers, in order to have a different data on the different types of rivers that contribute to the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande basin. And second, also to understand the ecosystem responses related to different types of natural flows. What we're doing is linking both the biological and the geomorphic responses of flow to the different contributions to flow. If we look here and we see the blue line and we see the large flows when we have rain, we see certain species such as the spawning of the matalote chata fish that benefits from this type of conditions. And as we see also, we have the hydromorphic conditions that give certain conditions, such as maintaining the river more open. And so we eventually hope to develop more recommendations on ecological flows. Next slide. And finally, we're characterizing the wet and dry periods as a resilience indicator. On the left side, we see 2 figures of the natural system. And if we look at the top, we see that the system changes and varies between dry and wet periods. And it has done so constantly over time. So in terms of resilience, if we look at the lower figure, we see here on the X plane, there's two bases of attraction where the system varies from a wet to a dry basin. However, with the regulated system that we have now in terms of the variation that occurs, the system no longer has this type of dynamic variation, and the system has maintained a dry, almost permanent state of drought. And so by comparing this data and the basis of attraction in the basin, we now see that we have moved into an extreme drought situation. And so these are some of the resources, the results of our studies. Yes, thank you very much. That is very important information. Thank you. And next, Elia, you have the floor. So how does my research respond to the needs that we've just described? It's important to study and to conserve the transboundary water resources and to also address some of the uncertainties that we face in the future. So we do this through the evaluation of transboundary waters. As you can see on the slide on the left, we have the cover of two important studies that are being carried out under the evaluation of transboundary aquifers. We have the binational study of the San Pedro aquifer and the binational study of the transboundary Santa Cruz aquifer. These studies contain all of the information that can be collected about these aquifers. It's information that includes physical geography, hydrology, hydrometeorology, geology, piezometry and hydraulic parameters, hydrogeochemistry, and we look at the current data based on a conceptual model of hydrodynamic behavior. And the report that on San Pedro was published in 2016 by the International Commission on Borders and Waters. And we also have the Santa Cruz transboundary aquifer study that has not yet been published. It's still under review, and we hope to have progress to conclude at least the majority of it by the end of the year so we can move forward to the next publication. Next slide, please. So in terms of other efforts that have been carried out, there have been harmonization efforts of different types of information that we have. And these reports, in addition to the text and the written information that we have, give us this geographic information. And this means that we must research and find spatial geographic information in the US and Mexico and input it into the same system in order to fit it together like a puzzle. And this is what we're working on. We don't have all of this information because in most cases we don't have all of this. And sometimes there is it's as if the border is we're a geological fault line, but the border is not a geological fault line between the United States and Mexico. And so what we need is more collaboration in this binational team to share this information. And if we see our geological map, uh, this is what we have as a result. You see how the different areas fit together in different colors. And yes, now next slide, please. Also, in addition to these evaluations of transboundary aquifers, we have also been carrying out studies of the impact of climate change and water management decisions. This is slide showing an article that will be published in the end of 2020 about the northern zone of the transboundary Santa Cruz aquifer, analyzing decisions made by both countries and how climate uncertainties may affect the entire area. So it includes a conceptual water balance model that takes into account all of the water inputs and all of the discharges to get an idea of the storage in the aquifer. And this can lead us to certain conclusions related to climate change. I know I've only got 2 minutes. I've probably ran out of time. Okay, well, I guess my time is up, but just to close, the biggest blocks we have here of water inputs are the Santa Cruz River or the effluent discharges, which are binational. So this is always very important to keep in mind that the biggest inputs are of a binational nature in our basin. Thank you very much.
So third question. What are the challenges that you have faced and how have you overcome them? Could be academic challenges, budget, or even personal challenges. So, well, we mainly have money challenges, infrastructure, and data. That's what we lack. But generally, mostly the challenge has to do with having to work with people who are much more experienced than I am. They're older, more experienced researchers. And another challenge has been in integrating into research groups that already have a high level of expertise and they trust each other when they ask for data. Well, sometimes we have communication challenges, or we say, here, we need this data, and they say, what are we going to be using it for? There's also technical challenges, but mainly it has to do with the work. I mean, we have to work a great deal at individual level, but also doing teamwork. And we have to convey the information and give it to other people who have different concepts, but it's very different to communicate because the technical language changes. But I am very grateful because I've had the opportunity to belong to teams in which I have learned a great deal with people that are great professionals and very good people. And there's one or two always that maybe are not that way, but what some people do should not affect our professionalism, our values. We are human beings and there's always room for improvement and for learning. But of course, there's people who are very sensitive. And anyway, these have been the challenges. Thank you. Sophie now.
Yeah, there are many challenges to work on a binational river basin and in an interdisciplinary collaboration. So the first challenges were related to the data synthesis we needed for the model. Building a model required a lot of data. That data was scattered across institutions and was available in different languages. There were different contents in between the two countries using different units. So the Mexican side is using international metrics, and the US side, the US metrics. And so on the right, you have two tables that show you the kind of data I had to deal with. And so here is data about water withdrawal. And so basically one is in Spanish, the other one in English, and the data units are different. And it was almost for all data sets. So before even like running the model, we have to deal with data processing and finding data and contacting people to find the data. So that was the first big challenge. The second challenge, and it is more about interdisciplinary collaboration, was the integration of anthropological knowledge into the model. So there was a tension between the type of research anthropologists do, which is finely grained, qualitative, and look for some specificities and difference in people, with what we had to do in the model, which was to try to have a quantitative input, aggregate information, and simplify. Another challenge was how can we scale out local perception and behavior about human decision, about human for a large river basin. So the anthropologists made more than 100 interviews, but how can we scale out to the huge basin? Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And so how have you overcome them? How I have overcome them? The first one was to develop an open source socio-environmental geodatabase. So basically, we aggregated many data sets that we classified in 5 themes: water and land governance, hydrology, water use and hydraulic infrastructure, socioeconomic and biophysical environments. And so the database is binational, so the information is homogeneous between the US and Mexico, and is on open access on a platform called Open Science Framework, and there is a link here. And then for the second challenge is related to the anthropology, the collaboration with the anthropologists. I think I've been very lucky to be with team members that were curious and committed and trust us. But what we did also was to use a lot of boundary objects that both modeler and anthropologists can understand. And so use map, diagrams to be able to build together a model. And the last point I want to say is that doing this type of research is an iterative process and it takes time. And we have to think that we won't solve all the problem in one afternoon, and that will take some time. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to be telling you in advance when you have 10 seconds, because otherwise we eat into the time of the next question. Is that okay? Lau, you have the floor. Okay, so in my field of research, with regards to challenges, like Diana said, we need data and more data. Well, so there's a lot of data to be cleaned, to be organized, because we have so many water measuring stations that we have. We still have gaps in spite of that. And so we have to fill these gaps. So the second challenge is how to disaggregate the data. We need to have complete data, we need to clean it. So we use multifractal methodology to take monthly data and convert them to daily data, which is a huge challenge because you have to evaluate 10,000 hydrograms per year visually. So it's a very challenging and time-consuming task. And in the professional field, well, you can see it here in these photographs. There's very few women in these pictures. The majority are men. The women are underrepresented. Women scientists are underrepresented in the research and in the decision taking. And there's harassment, there's, as Eliana said, it's common to be judged on the basis of your age. And when people address men, they mention their university title, not with women. I mean, this is the type of thing that we are sensitive to. If you're a young scientist, woman scientist, this is something that you're sensitive to. I totally agree with you, Laura. Thank you. Elia, you have 2 minutes. Well, I'm going to be very brief. Among these challenges, I didn't include them all, but among my challenges, number one is the language barrier, of course. These studies that took place, as I said before, I belong to a team of very good researchers. I don't know what we would have done if James Carney, and you're still there among the listeners. I don't know what I would have done if you had come into the team because you speak Spanish. He came in, he speaks Spanish, and this broke the ice. And for this type of studies where we speak English and Spanish and also Spanglish. So this is the way we communicate. And there's also institutional differences, and every country has their rules, so you have to follow them. And the way the studies are carried out, the way that the water is managed is totally different. And there's various works that have been published on the topic. One of them by Dr. Sandeep Mekhlal and Dr. Christopher Scott. If you're interested, I can give you a link. James tells me in Spanish, and the harmonization of the maps. I think that for you, it's very simple. You just put the data in Excel and it converts everything. But what happens if you have 10,000 hydrograms, like Laura, our colleague, said? That's too much. You have to go step by step and try to manage the data. Another important aspect is the revision of the different data according to the rules of different institutions, according to the rules of different countries and processes. And in the report of the Santa Cruz River, all those regions had to be reviewed from the point of view of the data. And it's not always easy to harmonize maps. This is an example where we did not achieve this, and you can see the boundary there. These are my challenges. Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, I think it's very impressive. Yes. So, last question. How do you think the forum can support you to move forward with your objectives? Eliana, you have the floor. Well, I'm sorry, but we couldn't hear you. I was in the wrong channel. Sorry. I belong to a binational group minute 232. And yes, I think that this form will also help to combine different approaches with regards to topics, and this is helpful. Also, we will be relating to our equals, and we will be able to learn in terms of researching networks of researchers, and we have common interests, and we will be able to get these results, and this would be done through teamwork, and we will promote trust, and that way the decision makers will be able to trust the results, and all this will be very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so Sophie, you have the floor.
Okay, so first, I also see the forum as a place for information and knowledge sharing. I think there are several modeling efforts going on among the scientists of the forum, and I think it will be a great opportunity to maybe document past and current modeling efforts in order to all know what were the goal of the model, where the model was being implemented, what did the modeler did, which platform tool did they use, is it open source, what were the results, is the model transferable? And this could be a synthesis, could take the form of a review paper. I'm saying this because I think some models have been published, but others have not necessarily been published. And some of the models have been published in Mexican journals, and so are not necessarily available to the American. I've been participating to coffee breaks, and I think that's a great opportunity to learn about more of the research going on in both sides of the border. And finally, I see the Binational Forum as a place for more collaboration. So by organizing social networking events and being able to meet more people, and also to advocate maybe for funding that could fund binational research team. So most of the time when we want to access to funding, it's mainly available only for one country or the university in one country. And so that would be great if the forum can advocate to foster more binational funding. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's something that we all struggle with. And I completely agree with you, Sophie. And Laura is next. To me, the forum is a jumping off point for openings and for inclusions, and especially for visibility of research done by scientists, by women scientists, in such an important issue related to water resources management and trans-border basins between the US and Mexico. But it can also serve as a guideline for other binational transboundary basins. I've worked on other transboundary regions and basins around the world, and I think this is a really incredible effort to see what's been done, the decision making, the inclusion of environmentalists and the public in general. I think it's an excellent example of cooperation between countries and different communities in terms of networking. And as Sophie was mentioning, forming binational teams. So I'm so pleased and honored to be here participating in this type of event. And this initiative to me seems really incredible. So thank you. Thank you all for participating. And we are building networks. And finally, Elia, You have the floor. Well, this slide may seem like my own propaganda slide since I'm on the executive committee of the Permanent Forum, but I'm especially happy about the working groups. If you look on the website of the forum, there is a tab for the different working groups on different subject areas, and you can access the different subject areas and find collaborators. And this allows us to have this constant contact and communication among those of us who are working on these transboundary water issues, because it's so important for us to always be up to date on the different research, on the new papers coming out, publications, on the latest models. So to me, that's the first step to do networking. And it's a first step to networking is to see who's working on the border issues. And so I go to the working groups on the website. And also, there are other benefits of our permanent forum Binational Waters website. And so I'd just like to show you some more of that on this next slide. As I have mentioned, we store models and tools, databases, and publications. So perhaps there's a certain article that's been published that I haven't read yet. It's and there's articles that have been published in magazines, and there's also certain articles that have not yet been published yet that are on the database. And we continue to add more items to our page with more help from the different collaborators that whoever wants to participate and collaborate with us. We are happy to work on this. Perhaps some of you are working on some model, something else that we could add to our collection of models and tools. And this is something that has been very helpful. It's been very helpful for me, indeed, this work of the Permanent Forum on Binational Water. So I will just conclude my statement there. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, and we do invite all of you to participate in the working groups, as my colleague Elia has said. And if you would like to publish your reports, articles, books, the page is open for the public to upload your contributions. So next we're going to move into our Q&A session. Elia will be our moderator, and we will take on some of the questions that the audience has submitted. So we have a few questions here now, and our time is short, so I will read the question, and if someone would like to answer, go ahead, let me know, please. I don't think we'll have time for each panelist to respond to each question. So Gabby will be the timekeeper on this. Help me with that, please. And just let us know if you want to respond to one of these questions. I will read the questions aloud. They're in English, and I must change channels back and forth in each language. Or Elia, if you like, you can just stay on the same channel and we can translate them into Spanish. That's fine. I'll just stay on my channel and I'll do my own translation. Now, next question, the first question. We have seen two challenges in the scientific world of gender and of age. How do you approach those challenges each day? Who would like to respond? Who among our panelists would like to answer this one? Eliana? Well, age, I think, is like in any area of work, you're trying to get more trust and confidence among people. And teamwork is all very important in this. And it's also related to gender issues. When we seek a good work environment, and that's obviously it's very important. And also, I was raised at home to be someone who's going to go out and do what I want. And so I think that's also an important opportunity to point out, and those of us who were raised with families with a very broad outlook. So that's been very important to me as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Eliana. And next question. The next question I have is, who is a role model for you? Or have you had formal or informal mentoring through this program? Or I'm not sure who would like to answer the question. If we don't have a volunteer, I can answer it, but yes? Okay. Apologies from the interpreter. The audio is really cutting out. We cannot hear the speaker.
Sí, pero
Apenas te estamos escuchando.
Mejorando.
cortas.
A ver. Híjola, se fue por completo.
no, ahí está, pero apagó su video.
Ah. Ya me estoy.
Laura,
Me
¿nos escuchas?
Bueno, que contestar. Sí, escucho. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí,
Ahorita sí.
cortado, pero sí, 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 mejor.
Ok, bueno, trataré. Si no, alguien más que conteste
Sí.
y ya contesto eso. Bueno, para mí ha sido de gran ayuda o grandes modelos a seguir han sido en mi grupo de trabajo en UC Davis específicamente, porque hay varios modelos, o sea, hay personas que están en agricultura, hay personas que están en machine learning, hay postdocs que están en temas de glaciación, en temas geomorfológicos. Entonces, creo que realmente si no podría escoger a una persona, es más todo este equipo de trabajo de donde se pueden sacar ciertos tipos de atributos o de estrategias y de metodologías para que mi investigación o nuestra investigación siga andando, ¿no? Entonces, creo que es lo más importante para mí, pues tener este equipo de trabajo que funcione como mi núcleo de investigación.
To be my research nucleus.
Listo.
Very good.
Creo que se cortó
Okay.
todo. Bueno,
And
creo que
I
perdimos
think
el
we got it. I
mensaje.
think we got your message, and it just cut off again, but we got your message. So thank you so much, Laura. And now the last question from the public here, the next question, which will be our last one, is this research has always been oriented towards people outside of the scientific community, such as decision makers or others. Sophie, do you have a response on that?
So can you repeat the question? I didn't get the question. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Have you submitted your research to people outside of the scientific community, be they decision makers or in different public events?
Okay. Personally, I didn't present my research to community of decision maker, but I've been interacting a lot with local institutions, especially to get access to data. And they were very interested by the development of a binational database. And so I've been communicating to them the results. So that they can have access to it. But I think, yeah, if I could, I will make more effort to present the finding. I'm based in Oklahoma, which is a bit far from the basin. But yeah, I would like in the future, we have more opportunity to present to a broader community our results, yes.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Sofi. Tenemos una pregunta más. Esta pregunta dice así: ¿cómo podemos unirnos a realizar una representación más diversa y apoyar a las mujeres en la ciencia? ¿Existe un link para promocionar entre más mujeres que están en la ciencia? Esta la voy a tomar yo porque se me hace que soy la única que se ha tratado de escapar de las preguntas. Yo pienso que, por ejemplo, estar aquí hablando en este foro es un paso importante para la promoción de las mujeres en la ciencia. Que yo sepa, o bueno, a lo mejor podríamos salir de aquí diciendo, generemos un grupo de trabajo o un grupo de mujeres en la ciencia de las aguas transfronterizas. Estoy hablando ya por todas, pero es lo que se me ocurre a mí, porque yo no tengo información acerca de grupos específicos. No sé si alguna de ustedes tenga y quisiera completar mi contribución.
A mí me gustaría meter mi cuchara, si me lo permiten.
Adelante.
Yo creo que es una excelente pregunta y promueve una excelente iniciativa, que yo creo que el foro es responsabilidad del foro y tenemos todos los elementos en el foro para poder hacerlo. Entonces, todo el comité ejecutivo del foro está aquí y yo asumo que todos estamos de acuerdo en que una iniciativa de mujeres en la ciencia dentro del foro es algo no solamente necesario, es urgente y es nuestra responsabilidad hacerlo. Entonces, a partir de ahora, yo creo que esta es una tarea del foro, es uno de los objetivos primordiales. Además, es parte de nuestros valores: la equidad, la transparencia, la representatividad y la integración de todos los sectores en la ciencia, en la frontera. Entonces, yo creo que vamos a tomar esta iniciativa dentro del foro y hacerlo parte de nuestros objetivos. Ya después platicaremos en qué forma y en qué nivel, pero definitivamente dentro de las primeras prioridades. Y con eso termino mi comentario.
Ahí, si me permiten añadir, me gustaría, o una acción que recomendaría para mejorar este reto, es la inclusión de las mujeres de forma explícita en congresos, en desarrollo de investigación, en propuestas de investigación, en conceptualizar a la mujer como parte de la investigación, en que se les dé el crédito que se merecen. Creo que esa es una primera contribución que se puede hacer, tanto de mujeres como de hombres, tanto del foro como en sus centros de investigación. Y bueno, es básicamente eso, ¿no? También generar cultura de prevención, responsabilización, de tener pláticas abiertas sobre la concientización de incluir a la mujer en la ciencia y de evitar este tipo de, pues, de exclusión o de misvaloración a la mujer, que si bien son pocas las que no lo han sufrido, entonces pues creo que este es un gran paso que está haciendo el foro, sobre todo en este ámbito de gestión de agua que tal vez en algún momento estuvo liderado por hombres. Pues ahora aquí estamos, ¿no? Y esto es básicamente pues meterle más push a un motor que siga para que la ciencia pues ayude a la sociedad y al ecosistema en general.
Me gustaría decir algo así. ¿Todavía hay tiempo?
Claro, adelante.
3 minutos, sí.
Sí, rápidamente nada más. Aquí en el Instituto de Ingeniería hay un programa de mujeres en la ciencia que hace difusión sobre las actividades que hacemos las investigadoras de aquí del instituto. También creo que esto es un cambio, ¿no?, generacional que se va a ir dando y que también nosotros como participantes de este cambio, porque por aquí había una pregunta en el chat sobre qué actividades requeridas para incentivar la participación de mujeres en las ciencias. Creo que también vienen desde la formación muy temprana. Hay programas de mentoría tanto para niños, niñas, en el que se ofrecen estas prácticas con niños y también con jóvenes de preparatoria, que se nos asignan a un estudiante para que nosotros la vayamos incentivando en el área en que quieren incursionar en ingeniería o en ciencias. Creo que también eso es parte de una actividad propia, ¿no? Que nosotros también nos involucremos en ser actores de estos cambios y apoyar a los que se necesiten.
Sí, yo creo que eso es una tarea del foro, no solo del foro, de toda la comunidad fronteriza, pero sí me gustaría que el foro tomara esa iniciativa. Ya tenemos, por ejemplo, aquí comentarios en el chat de mujeres que están ahorita participando en el evento, que les interesaría ser parte del foro de mujeres y la ciencia, ¿no? Ya hasta le puse el nombre. Dentro.
Ya me vi.
Ya nos vimos aquí.
Ujú.
Yo creo que es una excelente idea y vamos a retomarla. No solo la parte de las mujeres, yo creo que también la parte de los jóvenes, no quiero decir niños, pero jóvenes y no tan grandes, no tan teenagers, digamos.
Hay que buscar una
Hay que agarrarlos,
definición que abarque las...
como dicen, hay que agarrarlos tiernitos y tiernitas, digamos, jóvenes undergrads, licenciaturas, ingenierías, todos ellos que pueden estar pensando en a qué dedicarse en el futuro, ¿no? Y en qué región. Finalmente todos terminamos trabajando en una región y además en un área. Entonces, es una buena iniciativa también que debemos de acotar, sobre todo si son comunidades fronterizas, ¿no? Ahí tenemos una doble tarea, porque además están doblemente, enfrentan doblemente los retos, ¿no? que enfrentamos a nivel doméstico, digamos, o a nivel interno de nuestros países, nuestras comunidades fronterizas, tienen esos mismos retos duplicados, ¿no? Por todo lo que implica vivir en una región fronteriza. Por lo tanto, esa es otra tarea del foro y de muchas otras que vienen por venir, pero gracias a este foro del día de hoy, tenemos dos tareas nuevas, ¿no? Una, integrarnos, liderar, encabezar, fomentar, instruir, dar ejemplo, como mujeres y como foro. Y dos, acordarnos de que vienen otros detrás de nosotros, ¿no? Unos más jóvenes, más frescos, que necesitan conocer nuestros retos al día de hoy en la región fronteriza. Entonces, nos lo llevamos de tarea y les cedo la palabra a las hosts de hoy para que cierren la sesión de hoy.
Bueno, pues con eso concluimos. Les damos las gracias a las panelistas, a todo el equipo de trabajo, a toda la audiencia que están aquí. Estamos muy contentos de haber tenido nuestra primera sesión de Hablemos de Ciencia. Les platico que también es el primer evento que tenemos en español, honrando nuestro carácter de institución binacional, celebrando la inclusión de las culturas. Entonces es una alegría para todos nosotros que nos hayan acompañado. Estamos muy entusiasmados en seguir haciendo este tipo de programas y por supuesto en seguirlos invitando y a quien se quieran sumar a enriquecer toda esta plataforma, ¿no? Es parte de lo que nos da esperanza y le cedo la palabra a mi compañera Elia para que dé cierre.
Pues muchas gracias a todos por sus contribuciones valiosas a la ciencia y contribuciones de mujeres brillantes en la ciencia. Esperamos poder debemos repetir este tipo de sesiones. Tenemos mucha tarea. Aquí los miembros del comité, miembros del comité ejecutivo del Foro Binacional, pues significa que deberán esperar noticias nuestras pronto. Muchas gracias entonces. Gracias.
Gracias a todos.
Los invitamos a visitar nuestro blog en la página, donde podemos continuar charlas de este y cualquier otro evento que vayamos teniendo en la plataforma. Inscríbanse en nuestra página si no lo han hecho. Muchas gracias, que tengan una bonita tarde y nos vemos pronto.
Bye, gracias.